Hey friends, it's Just the Gems, and I'm the main character of this YouTube channel. Speaking of main characters, aren't they great? I mean, sometimes. Sometimes they suck. But I want to talk about protagonists that break the mold and actually leave a lasting impression on us. So I sat down to think of the 10 best protagonists in JRPGs, and these were the first to come to mind. If I missed your favorite, let me know down in the comments. If I missed your birthday, then I'm sorry. I didn't know about it. Your present's in the mail. All right, let's get into it. If I were ever asked to put together a list like this and I didn't include Cloud Strife, then I'm being held against my will and I'm sending a coded message for help. Cloud is among my favorite protags because I just straight up love his story. He's a complicated kid, he's been through a lot, and he unironically throws around phrases like "let's mosey," which as a fellow cringe millennial, I respect. Now, to be fair, if I were only to look at the original release of Final Fantasy VII, I don't know for sure if he'd be here. It's hard to read much emotion from those blocky characters, and the writing in the OG 7 is... Look, I'm not blaming the localizer, but it's a bit rough. But taking into account the remake trilogy, he has really blossomed into an incredibly rich and layered character. A lot of his appeal comes from his voice actor, Cody Christian. He just brings an unbelievable level of nuance and pathos to the guy. On the combat side of things, I mean, seriously, is there any weapon more iconic than the Buster Sword? In terms of its look, that is. I guess, like, what's-his-name sword from The Lord of the Rings is pretty iconic, right? The long-haired guy. You know who I mean. Oh, all the guys have long hair in those movies? Well, whatever. Cloud's great. I love him. What can I say about Estelle Bright that hasn't already been said ad nauseum by 100,000 Trails fans on the internet? Maybe I like her socks? I don't think anyone has complimented her socks. They're nice. Not sure if that takes me anywhere close to the weird feet people on the internet, and if so, I apologize. Anyway, Estelle, man, she's the best. Her name literally means bright star, and that's pretty much her personality. She's the kind of kid that would drive her teachers nuts, but they'd all secretly think she was cool, even if they had to be stern with her in front of everyone else. I know something about that. I think the thing I like most about Estelle is her realistic optimism. It's not like she's a one-note character. She's not just cheerful all the time or anything like that. She feels very human, just a human that leans more toward positivity than negativity. Watching her growth over the course of the first Trails in the Sky and into the events that kick off Trails in the Sky second chapter, you really get to see some of the best character development in video games, period. She's really gotten even more of a chance to shine with the remakes, and as has always been the case, actress Stephanie Sheh just brings so much life to the character. Anyway, if you know me at all, you probably expected Estelle, so I wanted to get her out of the way early on. She's incredible. Moving on. Fei Fong Wong isn't just a guy with a really fun name to say. Fei Fong Wong. Fei Fong Wong. I don't know. It's got a good mouthfeel. But he's also a guy with a really messed up past. And like, that's before you even get into the whole weird Xenogears-ness of it all. Like, he's your standard amnesiac protagonist in the beginning of the game. Been there, done that, right? But pretty quickly, thanks to a tragedy that he's kinda responsible for, he ends up cast out from his home and on the road with nothing but a giant robot and a dapper doctor for company. But all that is just prologue, and when we get into the bigger story, man, Fei's got it rough. Still, despite having his whole world rocked multiple times through no real fault of his own, he maintains a positive outlook and manages to bring together a fairly ragtag group of societal misfits. And then he gets to kill God or whatever because it's a JRPG, right? But with all the crap Fei's been through, you kind of feel like he's earned it. Fei is a truly great character, but I'll admit, my judgment might be more than a little clouded by the fact that Xenogears is one of my favorite games of all time. Here's hoping we get a remake of this one at some point. I know there are a lot of you that will have your minds blown by all the revelations about Fei's past. I just wish I could experience his story again for the first time because it's just that awesome. Okay, I get why this might be a controversial pick. After all, isn't Tidus the main character? And are you already typing a comment about how it's pronounced Titus? If so, please pause and consider that you are incorrect. In Japanese, his name is Chida. They don't say it out loud in the game, but they do say Tidus in Kingdom Hearts. I don't have to explain myself, it's just facts. But all that pettiness aside, when it comes to the subject of who's the main character of Final Fantasy X, I look at it this way. The main character of Moby Dick is Captain Ahab. The storyteller is Ishmael. At least that's what he wants us to call him. In the same way, Final Fantasy X is the story of Yuna, but it's told through the perspective of Meg Ryan, Tidus. Yuna is a summoner, and in the world she lives in, summoners have a very serious and unfun job. It's up to them to defeat Sin, a big whale monster that destroys villages indiscriminately. The way they do this is by going on a pilgrimage, visiting all the temples in the world, and gaining the power of the various Aeons, which are what the summon monsters are called in this game. Quick side note, why do they have to change the name of the summon monsters all the time? Chocobos have always been Chocobos. Moogles have always been Moogles. Can we pick a made-up word and stick with it, please? Sorry. I know, I get fired up about strange things sometimes. It's part of my charm. Right? Charm? Anyway, Yuna spends her pilgrimage knowing full well that the cost it's going to exert on her is enormous. But she puts an inordinate amount of energy into making sure everyone with her is happy and taken care of. She is the very definition of selflessness. But when her eyes are finally open to what's really going on in the world, she starts to see things differently. And even though it doesn't change how selfless she is, it does light a fire in her to actually try and make the world a truly better place. Also, she sings pop songs in the sequel, but we don't have to talk about that. I just admire her character a whole lot, and she'll always be a favorite. It takes a lot for me to even utter another Trails series protagonist name in the same breath as Estelle Bright, but I'm gonna do it. Estelle Bright and Van Arkride. Actually, that wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. Turns out there's actually a lot of philosophical overlap in Van and Estelle's characters, despite them being on basically the polar opposite ends of the optimism-pessimism spectrum. Van is a Spriggan, which means he's a fixer who takes on jobs from essentially anyone, even really, really bad guys. He'll do it so long as the job itself doesn't conflict with his own immovable moral code. Yes, that means Van does dabble in some work for the bad guys from time to time. A lot of his friends are not very into that. But he's principled, and even if you don't agree with his principles, at the very least, you can't say that he isn't consistent. But the great thing about Van is that he's always thinking about the greater good. His moral code is centered around it, and much like Estelle, things tend to work out for the best when he's involved. All that personality stuff is key, of course, but he's also got the ability to turn into a badass monster called the Grendel. That's Grendel with an E, not Grundle with a U. Don't make the Google image mistake I made. He has a mysterious and dark past, and he's a grown-up dude just trying to make a living in a topsy-turvy world. He's fantastic, and in his first 3 Trails games so far as lead, he's really knocked it out of the park. Hey, if you're enjoying the video so far, would you consider checking out my podcast? It's called the JRPG Pursuit, and each week my co-hosts and I dive deep into the world of JRPGs to cover a whole variety of topics related to the genre. We have a lot of fun, and we'd love it if you'd give us a listen. The link is down in the description. All right, thanks. Let's get back to it. Lukida from Starbites is the newest main character on this list, and I just need to shout her out. She's a truly excellent main character and honestly provides such good representation for women in JRPGs. Lukida is a scavenger on the rundown planet of Bitter. She and her friends run a small operation, going in and out of wrecked spaceships and finding salvage to sell, all in the hopes of saving enough money to get the heck off the planet and find greener pastures. See, Lukida's parents died when she was a baby, leaving her with both a massive debt and a massive pain in her butt in the form of her guardian and debt holder, a woman named Fennec. She has a delightfully complicated relationship with Fennec, where it's almost a mother-daughter sort of thing, but there are layers and layers of sarcasm and resentment piled on top. I mean, more so than would otherwise be normal for a mother and daughter. The thing I like most about Lukida is that she feels like a realist. She's not just an overly bubbly stereotype, she's layered. She's a real grown-up with real grown-up problems to deal with. I also love that Starbites doesn't try to shoehorn in some sort of romance subplot for her. Maybe that'll come in a future title, but here she's a lady with a job to do, and that's where her focus is. As the story expands and as she starts to learn more about herself and her family history, you get to see a remarkable amount of resolve start to build in her. And by the end, it's impossible not to be rooting for her. I'm really looking forward to seeing where the developers take her in the future, because as great as she is already, I think she has a ton of promise going forward. I've said before that I'm not the biggest fan of Final Fantasy XVI. I know a lot of people had issues with the game becoming more straight up action and less RPG, but that really wasn't the issue for me. For me, it was much more that the world and the story were just so dark and dire, which feels way more like a Western fantasy thing than a JRPG thing. But one highlight I love from the game is Clive. He's such a genuinely decent guy. I guess putting it that way makes it seem like I have a pretty low bar, but keep in mind, The way leading men are most often portrayed is focused much more on power and cruelty. There's been a big anti-hero push in media for a while, and Clive is really the anti-hero. Despite being betrayed, enslaved, and mistreated his entire life, he still cares deeply about other people and goes out of his way to help. He's flawed, but he's always trying to overcome all the crap that life throws at him. I really can't talk about how great Clive is without mentioning how much of that is due to the performance by Ben Starr. It's honestly one of the best character portrayals in a game or a movie I've ever seen. He really deserves so much credit for making that character into a real person. On top of just being an all-around good dude, Clive also turns into Ifrit, which has pretty much always been among my favorite summons in Final Fantasy, so major props for that. There are other redeeming qualities about Final Fantasy XVI in my mind. It's not that I hate the game, but Clive does a whole lot to make up for what to me are some serious downsides. Shion Uzuki from Xenosaga is sort of the anti-protagonist. Not only is she a woman, which puts her in pretty rare company back in the PS2 era, actually still pretty rare company even today in the grand scheme of things, but she isn't tough or cool or suave or any of the traits we typically associate with having main character energy. She's an awkward nerd. She spends way too much time working, is completely oblivious to the interpersonal things happening around her, and she is in no way prepared to become the central figure in solving a 4,000-year-old mystery. That's a big part of why she's so great. Shion makes her such a good focal character because of how relatable she is. Most of us, like it or not, are much more like Shion than we are, say, like Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. Now, as this list will attest, I love Cloud too, but I guess I love Shion for equal but opposite reasons. It's cool to have someone whose primary weapon is their brain at the forefront of the conflict. Brains over brawn is always going to be my personal preference, especially in real life. You can easily tell at a glance that I'm lacking in brawn, but you can't tell how many brains I have. So I like to think of brains as the most secret of weapons. Unfortunately, I also do not have many brains. But still, Shion is a fantastic character. She's funny, often unintentionally, which makes her even more funny, and her history and connection with the story makes her incredibly intriguing too. I really hope we get some sort of remaster or remake of Xenosaga, especially after the reveals that came from the end of Xenoblade 3 Future Redeemed. We need more Shion in our lives, guys. One thing I appreciate about Blue Reflection as a series is that it so perfectly marries chill vibes with deeply uncanny and unsettling stories and situations. It's populated with characters that don't just have a sunny outlook on everything, which runs pretty contrary to the popular idea of what a magical girl series should do. The quintessential heroine for a story like this is Hinako Shirai. She was at one time a ballerina, probably would have been on her way to a professional career in dancing, but an injury set her back. Actually, it was bad enough that it's likely she'll never dance again. That sucks when you're like 17 and still have so much life ahead of you. That's what she was counting on, and now it's gone. She starts attending a new school, and pretty quickly she's made new friends who grant her the power of a reflector. That's the name of the magical girls in this story. This is great because at least when she's a magical girl, she's able to move around like she used to, but it also means she's constantly under threat of death from a bunch of nasty monsters. Hinako is probably the most negative person on this list. She's easily frustrated, sarcastic, and generally looks on the dim side. As much as I love an optimistic main character like Estelle or Clive, I also love a grim protagonist like Hinako. A big part of the story is watching her grow and change, and it's actually inspiring to see her transformation. If you miss Blue Reflection, you'll be able to get all caught up soon since Blue Reflection Quartet is coming out, and that gathers all the stories together in one. So keep an eye out for that. Man, ended on a couple of downers, huh? Much like Hinako, but probably on an even more severe level, Velvet Crowe from Tales of Berseria is a straight-up pessimist, but I'd argue her negative outlook is pretty well earned. At the very beginning of her story, she's horrifically betrayed by one of the people she trusted most, and she spends years enduring torture and pain before she finally breaks free to seek revenge. Velvet is cool because she's presented as this berserker out for revenge, but because you know her history, you can see the struggle she's going through. You can peer beneath the layers and actually understand where she's coming from. Tales games in general aren't known for their particularly deep or dark stories, so the fact that they go here with one of their main characters is pretty exceptional. Even though she has very severe intentions, you still find yourself cheering her on, maybe more enthusiastically than you feel comfortable with. Her story is tragic, but ultimately her story is redemptive. And it's such a refreshing change of pace in the JRPG scene. So that's it. Those are my 10 favorite main characters. At least right now. Ask me again in a year. Let me know how my list differs from yours down in the comments. Anyway, see you next time.